What is up, guys? It's your favorite YouTuber of all time, XTR. And we are here once again to talk. And we're talking about something is kind of like a rant topic. And this is definitely 100% my own opinion. And I know different players are going to have different opinions on this. You know, pros are going to think differently from me. Different coaches are going to think differently from me. But this is what I have kind of realized, at least for myself, and could be true for some of you guys as well. And this is about changing settings. And now the reason why I want to talk about this is because I talk to so many people and I've met so many people and they've all had the same problem, right? They fall into a slump. They aren't playing as good as they used to. So what they do to combat that is they change their sensitivity, they change their fucking resolution, and then they play for a week or two and it's right back into the slump, right? You get yourself out of the slump for a little bit and then you go straight back into it, or you play even worse than you did before. And one of the big reasons for this is something that I'm not really sure if it's a coined term or whatnot, but I've talked about this before in a video. This is a term called autopilot. If you don't actually have experience driving, then this may not apply to you, but you should be able to find something it kind of applies to. The term basically goes, if you're driving every day to work, okay, and you're taking the same route, eventually it's going to get to the point where you're just so used to it, it's so routine, that when you get in the car, you drive for a little bit, you're focused, you zone out for pretty much the entire ride, and then you just arrive at your destination, right? That's simply how it works for a lot of people. And a lot of people have this issue in Valorant. The way it translates over is you're put in these scenarios, you're put in these situations, you play the game so much that you eventually put yourself into autopilot and you're kind of stagnating around this certain area. You can plateau very easily due to this. Like you'll grind up and you'll get to a certain skill level and then you just plateau because you're not focused on improving. You're not focused on what you're doing as a player, and you're not focused on actively adjusting to the game scenarios as they happen, whether that be enemy players and the way they're playing against you, and whether that be the way you're playing in the game itself. You could just play the same way pretty much every single game and hope for it to actually work. Everyone has a play style, right? But what makes a good player is them being able to recognize where their play style is happening to fail them and to quickly adjust, right? And then it'll get to a point where you just stop adjusting. Okay, and I know this might be a little confusing, or I might be butchering like how I'm actually explaining this. You know, I'm kind of fucking brain dead, so like bear with me here. But you're gonna get to a point where you just stop adjusting to things as they happen, and you need to kind of snap out of that. And one of the best ways to do that, I've noticed, is by forcing yourself to, through the change of sensitivity, through the change of your resolution, because it's something completely new, something you're not really used to experiencing. When you change your sensitivity, you're forcing yourself to actually think about the way you aim, think about the fights you take. When you change your res, it's forcing you to think once again. Hopefully this is making sense to you guys. By changing your settings, you are forcing yourself to actually kind of focus up. And when you're playing on the same settings for so long, it's harder to do that. But once you get to the point where you've played with that sensitivity that you just switched to, that resolution that you just switched to, eventually you're going to fall back into the same thing, the same problem, where you're like, fuck, dude, I'm playing like shit again. I'm back in the slump. And that's because you've kind of already exhausted what it's given to you. And that's the sensitivity and the resolution just kind of forcing you to focus up. I'm not saying don't change your sensitivity, but I've found that sticking with my sensitivity and sticking with the resolution that I normally play with has helped me become a much more consistent player. Like, yes, I'll fall into slumps. Yes, I'll have my bad games, but it's easier to snap out of the slump and just kind of push through it than it is to get into a slump for like a day or two and then be like, fuck, I got to change my sense. Then you play good, right? You play good, you're chilling. But then 2 weeks later, you're not hitting the shots you used to hit, and you're even worse. You're even worse off than you were before you changed your sensitivity. So I'm not trying to make this video to like scare you out of changing your sensitivity. That's not at all what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying don't do it so much to the point where you're doing it like every 2 weeks, you know, just because you notice that you're dipping in skill. Stick with your sensitivity. Be dedicated towards your sensitivity. Once you're dedicated to your sensitivity and you're actively learning your muscle memory for that specific sensitivity and practicing on that sensitivity, I'm not saying it all goes out the window when you happen to switch, but you are slightly resetting yourself when you switch your sensitivity around. And that's one of the big problems I've noticed. I've been on a lot of teams throughout the years, Overwatch teams, Counter-Strike teams, Fortnite teams, you name it. And I've always played with high-level players who will be like, yeah, I'm going to switch my sensitivity and see how it works. They play with it for a bit. In the scrims, they're like, yeah, dude, this feels fucking amazing. I'm doing great. This sensitivity change was definitely a great idea. And then 2 weeks later, after playing with these players, they're like, dude, I don't know what happened. I'm playing even worse than I played before I switched sense. And that's because they were so used to their old sensitivity and so used to that muscle memory that switching it forced them to think about what they were doing in the game. It forced them to think about their aim. But in the long run, it wasn't beneficial because they lost a lot of the muscle memory that they had and they had to build that back up. And then they come to find out later that the sensitivity they switched to wasn't necessarily right for them. So my kind of takeaway that you should have from this is just be careful when you're changing your sensitivity around. Don't do it all the time. Don't do it every single time you have a bad game. Don't switch your sensitivity. Don't switch your res if you have like 1 or 2 bad games or you're in a slight slump. Push through the slump and see where you are then. And then if you're still not playing good and you really think you need to switch sensitivities, go for it. And one of the best ways I have found to reliably and realistically switch your sensitivity is to go back through and do a VOD review of a few games you've played and see where your sensitivity and where your aim is failing you. If you are over adjusting on majority of the shots you are taking, then you need to lower your sensitivity. If you are under adjusting, you need to raise your sensitivity. That is the easiest way to tell if your sensitivity needs to be changed. But if you are able to consistently hit shots, whether it be micro adjusting, macro adjusting, and you just fall short a couple times or you go too high a couple times, stick with your sensitivity for a bit longer. And if you're still not feeling it, change your sense, change your res, reset, figure it out. But aside from that, that's all I wanted to talk about. I hope you guys got something out of this video because this is kind of one of the biggest problems I've noticed in the esports scene is players getting scared because they're in a slump and then that fear drives them to make a decision that inevitably just harms them in the long run. And I'm not just like talking out of my ass here because I've seen this shit happen so many times. It's crazy how many times I've seen this shit happen. Yes, changing your sensitivity can be beneficial if it's done right. Don't do it on a whim. Don't do it just because you're in a slump, please. Those are some of the worst times you can change your sensitivity. So yeah, all right, that's about it. That's just all I wanted to talk about. I just wanted to get this off my chest. I've decided, if I'm going to go back to coaching, I may as well touch on this subject because this is a pretty fucking big one. This is a hefty mama. It is a big problem I've noticed. So, yeah. Do what you guys want to do with this info. Take it if you want. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. We can agree to disagree. This is just how I've always seen this particular thing in the scene. So, yeah. All right. Subscribe. See you guys later.